20 years ago, two guys were running around on a campus in Stanford, maxing credit cards, trying to prove that their idea called Google worked. 20 years later, Google employs 8,000 people here in Dublin and owns the tallest building in Dublin. That's Stanford, and Google has been done. So now we're looking at a time when I think next week Chinese mobile phone company Xiaomi is going to float, raised that between $6 and $10 billion, and it employs about 20,000 people. And it was only founded about 8 years ago using Android, which came out of Google. So in a circuitous way, what I'm trying to get to is that the next big tech company, as I said, Google has been done, but who's to say that the dream of what is going to be could not be in the mind of a child currently sitting in a refugee camp in Syria or Turkey, or someone on a campus in Nairobi in Africa. Why not? So I kind of just want to start with that. And Yuka, we had a bit of a conversation about this, and it's like, isn't it a bit conceited for Silicon Valley to think it should always have everything?
Sure, and I think that question is really appropriate, because I don't think the world should be trying to mimic Silicon Valley. It has, and one of the great things about Ireland that I've learned is that it has its own sense of culture, own sense of the land, and yet the best entrepreneurs from Dublin and the rest of Ireland come to Astia, and they are no different than any of the entrepreneurs that we've seen. They make sure that geography becomes irrelevant. So while they have these strong roots in Ireland, and they know that they're Irish, they see the global community as their market, their playing field, and they don't let geography hold them back in any way. And especially with women and entrepreneurs of color, Silicon Valley hasn't been successful for them. So why try to be that and try to fit into that when they can disrupt the system and figure out the road that they need to get on? Because both of you have said showing up is important and being yourself is important, and I think it has to do with just that self-expression, that entrepreneurs have that need to create, need to innovate, need to lead, and that's what they do, and they don't have to be in Silicon Valley to do that.
Maha, you're fostering an ecosystem in Muscat, and when you look at all the news every day is in the tech world, looks like it's coming from Silicon Valley, but the kind of companies you guys are fostering and the kind of ambitions they have and the kind of hurdles you see them having to overcome, how do you guys look at that world? Do you see it all being skewed towards Silicon Valley, or do you see a more vibrant world where you guys can sell to, and it's a fertile market?
Well, too many startups in the MENA region, Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. It's a dream to them. But I totally agree with what she said. I mean, we don't have to mimic ourselves. And again, we are special with our own culture and characteristics of our societies and communities. And whatever is applicable at Silicon Valley wouldn't be applicable in MENA region or in countries like Oman or GCC. So regarding the startups in MENA region, they are amazing, and quality of startups are really brilliant. But maybe they lack some sort of exposure. So I was telling my friend this morning, Alan, that we have brilliant quality of startups, but they lack the right ideas to work on. So they lack the exposure. So they need to be a bit more exposed. Sometimes they come in pitches and they tell us about their ideas, and they think it's the best thing in the world. And while we're sitting, we just Google and we show them how many replication of that idea is there in a better format. So they need to get themselves a bit exposed and know what's going on around the world. Yeah.
Mo, I'd just like to ask you about Asia, because if you were to ask me where I'd be more excited about I'd be looking more at what's going on in Shenzhen, what's happening with 5G and those type of technologies, and I can see sometimes why the US is currently making it difficult for Chinese companies to sell into the States. But when it comes to work with, say, Irish tech companies selling into Asia and the kind of Asian companies that you're dealing with, and encouraging to work with Irish companies. What are the trends you're seeing? What is it that Irish companies must think about when they look at, say, Shenzhen and Hong Kong?
Yeah, it's an interesting proposition of the Silicon Valley. Forget that. We're in the Silicon Docks right now. You just look around and you have Facebook right beside us, you have Google around the corner. So we're churning out a quality of talent in any event. And it's these sort of companies that are working around us in Dublin that are making people think more globally anyway. So Irish people are ambitious, Irish companies are ambitious. In terms of an Irish company entering into the Asian market, I think cultural differences and difficulties that go with that have to be addressed straight away. What works for your company and your product in Ireland might not work in China, in Hong Kong. The other thing is just getting people out there. And ambition is one thing, but don't be afraid to scale and scale big initially. We kind of have a habit of looking towards the UK, it's an hour on a flight, States, 5 hours on a flight, same language. But Hong Kong, the language of business is English. And China's getting like that very much so as well. So it's getting people out on a plane to experience it before you make that decision is absolutely critical. And there's people like me out there or the likes of Nest to help you integrate and become part of that ecosystem that you're trying to embed yourself into and sell into ultimately. It's just about getting out there, experiencing it, and appreciating the opportunity that if you are successful in Asia, it's telephone numbers business that you're doing versus our local market. But it's just being brave and go east instead of west.
Niamh, 3 years ago I was in San Francisco and I got to visit PCH's offices, and they whisked me off in a taxi to Highway 1's accelerator sign, which wasn't next door, was somewhere nearby, and it was like walking into a woodwork shop combined with an engineering or mechanics place, whatever, a garage. And at the odd time I could see the odd Irish head peep up and accent come around. They were all working on something that looked incredible, some kind of Internet of Things device or a drone of some kind. And I just wanted to ask you, from your experience with PCH and Highway 1 Accelerator to what you're doing today. I think you're living in New Zealand now, is that right? Yeah. So you obviously see the world as a big, vast canvas on which to draw on. A big playing field. What kind of things are happening? What are the possibilities that you see for creating, one of the things is also, I understand, is that it's one thing to create a software product, but hardware is a lot harder too. So your own perspective on the way you see the world and the possibilities of what's happening with technology.
So I got to see the world from a different perspective, going out to Asia right from when I was 22 years of age. And I guess the entrepreneurial mindset that every day within the Chinese mentality as well was something that blew me away. And they're so hardworking, but also seeing opportunities, seeing how to do things differently. So then when we came to set up Highway 1, and at the time, the big thing was, well, we need San Francisco and Silicon Valley to raise the funds, but then we need Shenzhen to actually deliver the product and create it and help them get their product to market. And I didn't realize such a big gap that was there of the understanding of what was happening in China and the potential of the market and Asia itself as well. And that completely shocked me because I'd been just living and breathing it every day. But I see it starting to shift very slowly, and that's a great thing about my role at Nest now, because we focus on Asia, Middle East, and Africa, and it's in those emerging markets. And so when startups, we're pulling startups over to Asia. When we see an opportunity for them to work maybe with a corporate partner, we're going after them and telling them, stop looking west, look east, look at the size of Thailand, look at the size of Indonesia, and how your product can apply there. And you can start seeing people being more open to that, which is amazing to see.
And the thing about people, I mean, I always love people. I'm a people person. I always get along with people. But the thing is, I also found that I used to do charity work, and I used to go to Belarus and places like that. And one of the things that was very clear to me that ultimately we're all the same. People are all the same everywhere you go. But the one thing that's also the same for all of us is that there are social barriers we all have to get through, financial barriers. There's also barriers to, I was very interested in what Lisa had to say in the previous presentation about, had grown up in Compton and, her parents propelling her and encouraging her to go beyond, the life she was given. And when it comes to social barriers, entrepreneurs, as I say, come from everywhere, can be anyone, but we still are dealing with a situation where it seems the same stereotype of the privileged white guy. In terms of each of your perspectives on the social barriers, the people you've met, the people who've inspired you, tell us a bit some of the things you think about social mobility when it comes to entrepreneurship. So I'll start with you, Mo.
Yeah, it sounds cliched, but we're here at Inspirefest, so I'll say it. The female entrepreneur, there's a long way to go with them, but the likes of this event here and the amount of people I'm meeting who are saying, I have my own startup, we're doing this, we're looking to scale, we're looking to fundraise in these areas. I think the female entrepreneurship is definitely it, from my point of view, which I'm seeing. Enterprise Ireland, for example, has a female entrepreneur fund, and there's a couple of these ladies in the audience today. They're doing great things. Some of them are actually impacting socially as well. So from flexible working with the Bodu to Aid Tech, which is using blockchain technology to distribute aid in Syria and Tanzania at the moment. The female entrepreneur is for me is the standout point at the moment. Things are being done to address that for sure. In terms of the entrepreneurs and their backgrounds, it's as big as you can dream, right? There should not be a barrier to this. I think that is, probably a case in terms of the funding with the VCs. We're seeing more inclusion. You can speak to that as well. But there shouldn't be barriers at this point in time. There are, but events like today, the people who are on the stage speaking at this are breaking down each one of those every bloody day.
Yuka?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's the system that needs to get fixed and not the women entrepreneurs or not the women entrepreneurs with color, of color. And let me be clear, entrepreneurship is hard. It's not meant to be easy. So if you're an entrepreneur among you, and you feel like this is really hard, congratulations, that's normal. So that's, and because of that hardship, something brilliant is gonna come out. And hopefully the rest of us will contribute to a system that's more meritocracy based. But in the meantime, I realize that you have to suffer this system. And as we get more privilege and power from your success, I think we have to remember that there is opportunity for all of us now to be able to speak at these events, to be able to say, if you are the token tech entrepreneur on a panel, to be able to say like, hey, I noticed that I'm the only woman on the panel. Do you know so-and-so? Because so-and-so will be great on that panel with me, and pull everybody else up. Because I don't think anybody is trying to be, the most people are not trying to be exclusive. They just don't know. And, thankfully, Ireland has a great support system where people know each other, and, being able to leverage that, I think we don't have to be the user of the system, we can be part of the system that's slowly healing the system and making it better.
It's about engagement by everyone to change that on a meaningful day-to-day level, I think. But I'm definitely seeing a sea change in Asia on that front, for sure. Mm-hmm. And especially when I come back to Ireland as well, you can feel it.
Okay. Maha?
Well, when you asked your question, I just remembered two of my female founder startups. They were coming from, a small village in Oman. So I barely hear them talking. So it took us a long ride to give them more confidence in themselves. And now you cannot stop them. They keep on talking and talking, you cannot stop them. But they need more confidence. Many startups, they are afraid from their own shadow, So I think the first barrier is from within. We just need to be more confident about ourselves and believe more in our ability. For example, we invest in people's ability to surpass their fears and go beyond it, and just make the wonders. So it's all the barriers initially are from within.
Niamh?
Yeah, I think, everybody's covered quite a lot of it. I think something that I've seen is that, it's more on the transactional side, but for people looking to expand to Asia and looking to raise money in Asia, it's that unknown. You're not from Asia, and you don't know if the relationship isn't there. And that ends up being a barrier for some startups who really want to focus there. And so much of that other money is in the West, in the US. And that's why it is good to have the likes of Enterprise Ireland that can help enable people from Ireland to bridge that. But it covers everybody. That's the thing. Not everybody has that fund that can help them do that. Yeah. And I think if especially in Asia and in the Middle East, it's kind of a more open mindset to some of the startups that are coming their way, I think, and being a bit less risk-averse about them could also help break down some of the barriers.
And I suppose just, I asked that kind of question last night of each person on the panel when we were talking about investments, and I asked each of you for a kind of prediction on where you would see things going. When it comes to the world of opportunity, I mean, as I pointed out, it's a seesaw at the moment and everything seems to be in one place. But, you know, the world family, you know, this week most of us were horrified by the events in the States, but we're getting more and more connected by social media. We know more of what's going on, whether we want to or not. Yeah. But when it comes to your own predictions on the things you care about when it comes to each of the spheres that you're in, what would be your own respective hopes for how you see things in the next 5 to 10 years? I'll start with you, Niamh, and work our way down.
Okay, my hopes. You know, I think it's equality, and that every conversation that you have, that the respect is there. Whether what your background is, your gender, your race, it should not matter. And I think everyone still today goes into meetings with preconceptions, and my hope is that we can level the playing field, all be equal, and change those conversations.
Okay, Maha?
Peace, first of all. I believe we do have a bright future, especially in the Middle East and GCC when it comes to investment and entrepreneurship. You can see, you know, more opportunities, more funds are coming up. So I wish, you know, 10 years back, I had these opportunities. I keep on telling my startups, these are a golden era for you guys. You just, you know, nail it, because you never know, within 10 years' time, you know, everything can change. So I think the future is bright. Lots of opportunities are up there, and yeah.
You good? Yuka?
So I'm not sure about prediction, but at least what I want to set as a goal and work towards and get everybody working towards that is really changing the fundamental view that entrepreneur is somehow in a more disadvantageous position compared to the investor, where they're in a position to ask for money, and that's a very humbling position. And rather than the investor taking it and seeing it as a gradient of power, what if we all started treating each other as equals? So this is not just that entrepreneurs amongst themselves need to be treated as equals, but between the entrepreneurs and the investors. If those two parties could be treated as equals, I think a lot of the non-civility type activities and the hashtag Me Too movement, I think that would go away if we could do that. So that's my goal, is to design a system and for myself to be part of that change, where I can make sure that investors and entrepreneurs are presented on an equal setting.
Mo?
Been given the karaoke mic now. Predictions, a couple of Irish unicorns, that's what I would like, obviously. It's not as noble as world peace, but I want some Irish unicorns. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. What I would like is where the company is as good as its business plan and its team and their projections, and that's what it's based on. Like I said, there is an opening conversation on a global stage right now of freeing up capital. Where is that money coming from? Is it going to be coming from Asia? Yes is the answer a lot of the time now. That's, the Chinese market is ready to invest in companies at the moment. And that's an interesting proposition for us in terms of what I think is coming down the pipeline for us. I think companies that have a social impact will do very, very well. I think the fintech offerings will continue to rise. That is a very upward trajectory right now. And Ireland is actually very good at that as well, so we can talk to that afterwards. But for me, it is just sort of that globalization of the startup, right? I don't care where you're from. And if you're a Hong Kong company over here, or a Chinese company operating in Oman, or you're a US company setting up in Ireland, we're all working together on a collaborative basis. And like I said, it's the teams pulling together and the investors and the VCs helping that. It's not just about, you know, the dumb money aspect. It's that holding your hand, the support that you get, because it's one thing to get investment, it's another thing to start scaling and to become that large, steady company. So there's an awful lot of help around there in the world. I say this wherever you are from, there are connected ecosystems in each one of your jurisdictions. Use them, because people are inherently good and willing to help, and especially for the startups at the moment. So freeing up of capital, more engagement, and a global conversation about scaling.
I like the idea of Irish unicorns, you know, I think Claire Lee mentioned that I said something about a rising tide. I was paraphrasing Sean Lemass, a former Irish Taoiseach, and he was saying a rising tide lifts all boats. So with that, thanks to the panel, Mo, Yuka, Maha, and Niamh. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Good.